I have been developing my own watches for my own watch brand for the last 10 years. I started my journey in watchmaking just over 25 years ago in Hackney in London at the Technical College, which has been defunct now for some years. During the 25, 26 years that I have been in this business, I have moved from job to job. I have been involved in everything from after-sales service, product development, training, development of new companies, development developing brands on a commercial basis in new markets, and I've touched on pretty much everything. It's basically the inability to be able to stay doing one thing beyond a point where I've actually mastered it, if that makes sense. The moment that I have absorbed as much as I can learn about a subject, I have the need to continue growing so that I've always moved on. Ultimately, with what I do, the only area where you can continue to grow in my field is in the element which is creative. So today, all of my energy is going to my own pieces. My talk, what I'd like to talk about briefly over the next 20 minutes, half an hour, is a new era in watchmaking. But before I actually dive into that, I just want to go back to the dawn of watchmaking. It's a fairly common perception that watchmaking has been around for centuries. The reality is that the industry that we're involved today, wristwatches, is very, very young. It's basically under 100 years old. And most of what you see in the modern watch industry today was born during a period from the nascence, from the very first watches, from about 1900, 1910, through to the end of the 1940s. Most of the iconic brands that exist today were created at that point. There was a period of imagination and creativity that happened then, which has never been seen until today. Rolex, who are known phenomenally for the oyster, at that period, when they began, they were making cushion case watches, octagonal, princes, bubble backs, princesses. They made an amazing variety of pieces, most of which are not really known today, but they were finding their way. They were experimenting. And as such, if you look into their history, as with companies like Cartier, it is really, truly phenomenal. By the time we got to the 1950s, most of these companies had actually established themselves. They had found out really what worked, and they were starting to produce more and more in volume. They could no longer, as I see it, be as creative and as imaginative as they were prior, because the companies were getting too big. Their flexibility, the possibility to be risky or dangerous, or simply really creative, had been replaced by the need to generate quantity, volume figures. From about 1950 to 2000, the industry completely changed. The innovation of quartz almost practically decimated the mechanical watch industry between the 60s and the 70s. And then from the 80s, when everything had been killed out and replaced by mass production of cheap but highly accurate timepieces, by the time that had peaked, the mechanical watch industry then was effectively reborn. And most of what you see today in all of the big companies is actually from that period. Even though a lot of the history goes back a lot further, most of the companies have actually created and established the businesses that they have today over the period of the last 25, 35 years. There are many formulas in the industry that people have used when it comes to how to create a new business. If you look at the big companies, they use their iconic designs, and they continue. They have a DNA which carries on. Then if you perceive a new generation of watchmakers, one of the very first was Daniel Roth. Daniel Roth, who spent over 15 years establishing the new Breguet company, then produced his own company with the similar design, cut sides, became one of the very few new iconic case designs of the last century, following the first half century. He actually showed that somebody who hadn't been around for 100 years, who hadn't got the history of Vacheron or a Paddock, could actually be a success. Following Daniel, there was companies like Frank Muller, who adopted early styles from the 20s and the 30s, often cases which were beautiful cases by companies like Moser, who were making watches mostly for the Russian market. He took those and he made them his own. Roger Dubuis did the same thing, but taking early Paddock designs, and because he was from Paddock, and giving new life to them using his own style. But all the time, all of the motivation for these pieces actually was born in an earlier period in time. Move on. After Dubuis, there became another evolution in watchmaking, and you had the birth of the entrepreneurial watch manufacturer. Richard Mille actually opened a completely new type of watchmaking, a company which had a very clear vision, balanced on highly technical, innovative timepieces. He had no history, he had no, he didn't have 150 years of established reputation. And he again showed that somebody who hadn't been around forever could be extraordinarily successful. I mention all these different people because all of these companies actually lead to why I'm here today and why I'm able to do what I do. Combine that with new technology. 20 years ago, I couldn't have done what I do today. Many different reasons. One is the ability to touch the final clients, the final consumers. For those people to actually have a more discerning and better understanding of the industry. Through internet, through forums, people can actually communicate, people can learn, exchange information, actually talk to the final, talk to the watchmakers that are actually producing their pieces. That's the communication side. The education which exists, the level of education that exists today is way beyond anything which has ever existed in the previous years in this industry. It's discerning in relation to the people, the product, the calibers, the materials, the cases, the commercial aspect, the margins that are built into the final product, the different strategies that are used by different companies, how they are going to sell. So there seems that there has to be more and more integrity in the final products for people to actually believe in them. And then you enter this new period. People like myself, Max Bousset, who was earlier, other watchmakers, other entrepreneurs who actually genuinely believe in what they do. And because of the internet, because of CNC, because of CAD, because of the possibility to touch people and to be able to produce a highly technical product, highly technical movements, cases, designs, because of CNC machining, computer-aided design, there is, with the knowledge mixed in with this technology, anything is possible. None of those things could have been done 25 years ago, not by small independent companies. This opening, this opportunity, means that people who are passionate about what they do, and I use the word passionate because the business that we are in is so challenging. If you are not driven to make a success out of it, I would never recommend anybody to get involved in the first place. You have to be driven, you have to love what you do, and you have to keep on pushing and adapting, and really, everybody has to work. But in the field of watchmaking, it is a 24-hour-a-day occupation. Most of us, people like myself, we don't have the marketing resources to pump millions into actually promoting ourselves. So we are in a position where the best salespeople and the best sales strategies that we have are to actually be in front of people and explain who we are and why we do what we actually do. What makes us different from most of the other companies? Many different things. One is the actual volume of pieces that we produce. Some people, I have colleagues who produce 10, 20 pieces a year. This year I will have produced about 200 watches. It's minuscule and it's beyond comparison with the larger companies who are producing tens of thousands of people. But we are not them. We're not in competition with those kind of people. What we are able to do, however, are make watches, develop concepts, develop ideas that are representations of who we are as individuals. As such, quite often, the designs are not necessarily safe. They're not the kind of pieces that are going to apply to everybody. But we're not doing it really for that reason. We're doing it because we absolutely love that which we do in the first place. The result is slowly today, because of the technology, because of the knowledge, because of the internet, because of the opportunity to be able to execute these high-level, complicated and simple timepieces, the result is that you see a new generation, a new type of watchmaking which has never really existed before. It encompasses the same kind of imagination, creativity that existed nearly 100 years ago. That is what defines independent modern watchmaking. That is what makes it interesting. And my perception with the collectors that I meet as I travel around the world is that more and more collectors who have bought their Tissot's, Omegas, Rolex, Vacherons, Langers are now looking for that which is truly exclusive, truly different, that which has integrity, that which is potentially born, created by people who are alive today. A lot of my collectors, they're almost like patrons. They're patrons of watchmakers like myself and of other peers, of my peers as well. We have I'm getting there. We have observed that amongst these kind of collectors, quite often they become not disillusioned, but they just have the desire to not only own the pieces, but to get to know the actual individuals that are actually behind them. And then relationships become born between the collectors and the watchmakers, or the entrepreneurs at the same time. And this never existed before. I have made it with my own collection many pieces which are collaborations with different collectors. And I work with them to be able to help them, or we work together. It always remains a Speak Marin watch, but there's a part of them inside of it. This is one of the elements that larger companies are just not in a position to be able to actually work with for clear and obvious reasons. But it does show, and it does represent an entirely new period in watchmaking. Okay. As everybody can see, I'm incredibly well organized. Okay, so the essence of what I was trying to say, and I've actually jumped across different things and done it quite poorly, but when you look at this new generation, when you look at myself, when you look at the Boussets, the Debutunes, the Gronefelds, the McGonagalls, there's a menagerie of names out there. There are small companies that are only today beginning. A good number of them are watchmakers who really are trying to express who they are. Those people that are building what they are building today, I believe, are likely to be effectively the Pateks and the Vacherons or the Rolexes of the next generation. Everybody, any business to survive has to grow. If it doesn't grow, it'll die. And the likelihood is that 100 years from today, or probably at the rate that technology advances, in half the time, there'll be another watchmaker like myself standing here referring to my generation of watchmakers in the way that I refer to the generation of watchmakers of the Pateks and the Vacherons. Um, has anybody got any questions that I might be able to answer to be able to try to elaborate more what I'm trying to explain quite poorly? Please, Ian.
The fact that there are a lot of new independent watchmakers coming on, creating their own brands, is that a benefit because it's making the independents a bigger genre of watchmaking, or is the increased competition harmful for everybody?
The number of collectors or number of individuals, men and women, that are becoming more and more aware of the independent watchmakers. The number is increasing rapidly, again through the internet, through magazines, through forums. The number of, I would say, genuine, creative watchmakers who actually really bring something to the table which has value is very, very small. Most of us actually know each other, and we actually help each other as well. There's very much like a brotherhood between us all. You have some people who are incredibly talented, but commercially have no concept. Others who are more commercially orientated, but maybe technically a little bit less able. But I have taken my clients and introduced them to other watchmakers. Simply, in one way, yes, we're all in competition. But most of the collectors and the people who I know, they won't buy, for example, a Peter Speak Marin watch between the choice of a Peter Speak Marin and a Vianney Halter. The likelihood is that if they like the pieces, they'll buy both. It's kind of on a different level. It's not the choice of buying a Vacheron or a Patek or a Rolex or an Omega. At the level that we're at today, it's more about buying art. It's more like buying a painting. A lot of the guys that I know, I think they're buying what they perceive as the initial adopters of us. They are buying the first generation of pieces of future, of sort of a future watch history, if that makes sense. Okay? Okay. Please, fire away.
You're saying that in view of scarce resources, you prefer, in terms of marketing, I mean, you prefer to speak to people directly? That's the way you advertise your production. I was going to ask, what are your targeted markets in terms of geographies? Do you only concentrate on Europe, or you go to Asia and talk to people there?
Couple of things. One, I have been, as it were, an independent watchmaker for 10 years. But from 2000 to 2008, I was working for other companies. I worked for Harry Winston. I helped Max Bousset with his company. I developed a company called Maître du Temps. I did designs for different companies. I worked as a consultant. From 2008 until today, I've only worked just for myself. During that period of time, I have traveled quite extensively. I have sold watches everywhere from Vietnam to Australia, America, pretty much less, in all honesty, in Europe, although we've sold in England, Germany, Holland, a little bit in Spain as well. The majority of the time, today, the strongest market, I would say, is Asia. It would be in Asia. In relation to how the best way to market yourself, the reason I did all my collaborations, one was because I love the process. I love having the final piece in my hand, but taking an idea and making it real it's like a dream. You have a dream. I love what I do. You have a dream and you make it into something which you can actually hold. And that's one of the things that really drives me. So by doing all of those different collaborations, often my name was linked with the companies, whether it was a Winston, a Maître du Temps. I was then associated with them. I gave them watchmaking credibility as a watchmaker, and these companies then have the clout to be able to actually help me become better known. So that's one of the ways I did it. The other, today, the only way to as I see it, the only way to effectively publicize a product, a brand, is to continue to reinforce it, to push, push, and push, which requires a continuous stream of cash behind it. Occasional publicity in magazines, I don't think has a great deal of value. The internet forums I've used quite a lot in the past by trying to be involved. That I have less and less time to actually do. What I will do in the future is, and far more eloquently, better organized than I'm doing this evening, is actually travel. And I've been invited to various golf clubs, private institutions in America and around the world. And I will give a coherent, clear, well-organized, well-structured practice lecture to the people. There is nobody who can actually explain their art, their product, their watch, their passion for what they do better than the person who actually makes it. And then by actually being in front of the people, it's word of mouth, quite often. If I was trying to sell 10,000 watches, if I was trying to sell 5,000 watches, that wouldn't work. But I'm talking about tiny numbers of pieces. So that's how I tend to do it today. As my business grows, and already this last year it's grown by a factor of about 3. Next year it will probably be about the same. Then I'll actually have more resources, more cash, to be able to adopt more conventional means of communication. Because ultimately, if you want to grow, and you have to grow, then you have to follow, I believe, the same, not cleverly, but intelligently executed, the same forms, the same roads that everybody else does to be able to actually touch the final consumer.
I have 2 questions. I hope you will give me for that. 2 questions at a time. First one is, because you used to work in the industry for such a long term, have you noticed that the profile of the collectors has changed? I mean, in terms of age group, gender, and what people are looking to achieve by investing into luxury watches?
The nature of a lot of the people that I know, they are, for the most part, it is very male-orientated. They tend to be people who they have been enthusiastic for a very long time. They have a level of knowledge which is much higher than your average person. What they were like in the past, I can't really comment. Now, I've been in this business for 26 years. I've done what I've done, like being independent, for the last 10. And the people that I've known from the beginning are pretty much the same type of people. A lot of the individuals they're passionate about mechanics. They love photography. They like beautiful things. They are interested often in cars. But that's a real sweeping generalization. There's a great deal more to these kind of individuals. When I have meals and you have a mixture, like a group of these guys around a table, one set of questions that I ask them is, what is it that drives them to actually buy watches? And you can probably categorize it to a degree. Some buy for innovation. Some buy purely for design purpose. Some buy because of mechanical complication, or not, as the case may be. Others buy because of nationality, whether it's a Swiss, English, German timepiece. So there are similarities, there are similarities between the people, but there are a number of different categories which the people actually look at. A lot of what I do, although it is technical, is ultimately very art-based. And a lot of the people that buy my pieces, they like the mechanics, but I think they like having something which is basically unique. They're not the kind of people who wear a Rolex because it's a Rolex. And that's not a criticism of Rolex, because it's an amazing product. But there is like a stigma or a status, or at least there was, maybe less so today, that is attached to it. And the people that buy from myself and my peers don't tend to buy for, they're very much past that, and they're buying for the uniqueness of the piece.
And the second question will be a little bit more kind of financial oriented. As you said that you you went on your own in the year 2008, right?
I stopped working for other companies in 2000. I then, from 2000 and 2004, I was developing my own pieces, but it was only at the end of 2003, beginning of 2004, that I sold the very first of my own watches. And then in 2008 is when I stopped working for other companies completely, and then I concentrated all of my time in my own pieces.
Would you then be able to comment on the fact that usually, you know, that during the recession, there is advice that the luxury goods are actually performing quite well? Would you say that you can witness it? Because during recession, people don't tend to cut on luxury products like watches. Would you say that that's what you witness?
During the recession, which is actually part of an influence of one of the pieces that I have, I think everybody suffered big time in my industry. A lot of people who were maybe buying pieces which did not have necessarily a real intrinsic value pulled back. A lot of companies that I saw that were actually not really producing great product went bankrupt or changed hands. I think people went back to buying that which had intrinsical real value. There was definitely a change, and I think it hit the independent world because a lot of individuals went back to what they were much more comfortable with. So despite the growing interest in my world, people felt happier when they did spend money, which became less, buying that which they had bought in the past. Now we've actually come out of that, and we're actually at another period where I think what is existing today is actually far more superior than that which existed before, and we're taking off again. It's not crazy, it's not an incredible growth rate for the most part, but it's more intelligent, it's more pertinent. Very quick, without going on too long to your question. When I started off, and I was exhibiting in Basel with the AHCI, there was always about 10 questions that people would pose. The last question would often be, what happens if the watch goes wrong? Valid question. Most of us don't have after-sales setups in different countries. Therefore, of course, you want to know that if you spend a large amount of money on something, it can be repaired. That was when I began. One of the last questions. That's probably the second or third question today. So yeah, things have changed. I think people have become not necessarily clued up, but it's more pertinent, and it's more prudent. And that's, honestly, I think that's better for everybody as well. There were a lot of things made in the industry by big companies and small companies which never worked, or didn't really work properly, because every time you produced a complication or an innovation, you knew that you could sell it. So companies would push it out without having tested it thoroughly, and it would create issues. I've been involved in that, and it's actually not a technical thing. It's a political thing quite often, and that is the kind of thing which did happen. There were companies that I know built like that, that produced pieces which never really functioned, but they knew they could sell it, so they did it. Those days are gone. That's a good thing.
What's the first watch that you truly fell in love with? And also, where do you see your brand being? What's your aspiration for the brand in terms of, do you want to stay as a niche sort of producer, or do you want to be in the tens of thousands a year? Where do you see yourself? Or where do you want to be?
First watch I fell in love with was a Steve Austin Bionic Man watch in about 1975. Pressed the little button, LED light flashed up. That's one of the first watches I ever owned. First one I ever really loved was actually the motivation for a piece which I'll show you in a second. which was a Longines military watch made in about 1949. And it inspired a watch called the Spirit, which I launched here at QP. Where do I want to be in the future? I think in any business, you can't remain constant. You can't simply develop a clientele and think that you can just feed that clientele. Experience had it recently. I know a lot of other independent watchmakers where I am, and one of my friends, collectors, who's a friend, went to visit one of my colleagues, one of my peers. He went into his workshop and pulled open a drawer, and inside the drawer there was a list of, there was a set of kits. It's like a kit with all the different components inside upon which the the watch will be produced. And on top of each kit, there was the name of the client. And my friend, collector, he looked at the names and he basically recognized every name there. And it seems that an awful lot of the people, the patrons of independent watchmaking, are the same people. They're the people that have given us the opportunity to start, to give us direction, to give us the financing, to be able to buy the product, buy the watches, to keep the story going. But they cannot perpetuate it. The only way to continue is to grow. If you don't grow, you die. What I personally want to do, partly because of not necessarily my ambition as far as business, but when you develop one idea, you have 10 ideas. And as you develop the 10, you have 10 more. And one of the things I professionally want to do, or say to myself in years to come, is that I actually managed to realize as many of my own dreams, as many of my own ideas as possible. And the only way I can do that is to make my business grow. So right now, and it won't grow like other companies have done in the past because the world is a different place, but I want to take Speak Marin, and for the most part, Speak Marin today is known as Peter, it's known as me. But I want to take Peter, Speak Marin, and I want to really drive home that it is Speak Marin as a brand, and I want to make it grow. Next year we will, this year we've done three times as many pieces as last year, cash-wise. Next year it's likely to double, and with everything that I've done, I have a clearer view of what I should not do and what I should do. And because I have done so much diversity, I can adapt very quickly. And I see with my DNA, which is very strong, what works best in different markets for different types of collectors. And I will take that knowledge and I will push and push and push. That's my nature, but that's what I love to do. So I don't know where I'll be in 5 years' time, but it's going to be very different to where I am today.
Back to that question that went from number 10 to number 2 about what happens if something goes wrong. What happens if you're not here and you decide to retire? How easy is it to get that watch service? Can you answer the question that you posed?
The answer will be different depending on the watchmaker that you pose the question to. For me, I think my approach from the very beginning was a concept that I was going to make the business grow. So from the beginning, in markets that I was working in, whether it's Japan or America, I would train up watchmakers in those countries to be able to do the pieces. And the other thing is with what I have, and there's a parallel with my designs and my type of watchmaking, which I think links to iconic designs of another age, which is that the Piccadilly, which is the name of my case, will outlive me. My company will outlive me, and it will continue way into future generations. Speak Marin will not cease to exist when I'm not there. The infrastructure which I start to put in place today is something which I can see being built upon and will go way, way into the future. So when it comes to issues with pieces, and everything mechanical can go wrong, and ultimately everything mechanical needs to have some form of after-sales service, that's all built into my plan for the future. For the most part, the pieces that I design and make, I endeavor to make, even though they may be complex to produce in the first stage, when it comes to the after-sales service, when it comes to the servicing, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to execute it. You need to be a good, competent watchmaker who works to a high quality, but you won't necessarily have to have complex training beforehand to be able to actually execute the job. Okay?
Are the watches you're wearing right now your branded ones?
My own?
Yeah.
Yes. And what I will do now, because I should have done beforehand, is actually show you a little bit of what I've done. Okay. My work, everything that I've done, stems from this watch. Okay? When I was working for other companies, most watchmakers always want to prove to themselves, or not prove to themselves, but they want to make their own watch. Now, watchmakers make watches, but watchmakers don't necessarily design watches. Normally in the industry, you have watchmakers, designers, constructors, salespeople, commercial, communications. Now, I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't only a watchmaker, but I could be a constructor and a designer. So I started working on this piece when I was working for a company called Renault & Papy, and it took me over 2 years to actually finish the piece. It was finished in the beginning of the year 2000. And the DNA, everything within this watch, actually became the catalyst. It was the root to everything that followed. The design of the case, the kind of engraving, so the picture's not great, but the form of the cage at the bottom, the style of the hands, the style of the center dial, then is found in other pieces. Technically from the rear of the watch is a dual train. All the bridges are made from German silver, circled, angled by hand. This was one of the motivations for the cage bridge. This is a watchmaker's topping tool. I actually used it when I was making the pocket watch, but beyond that, the main wheel is something which I always loved. I think these tools are often used by companies when they're actually presenting watches because they're eye-catching. So I took that form, simplified it, made it a little bit more flamboyant. It became the cage bridge in my first tourbillon, and then afterwards it became the rotor in the watches that you'll see following. And today it's basically becoming my logo. The case that you saw in the pocket watch, I then had to transfer and make into a wristwatch. For the most part, companies design watches and then the function follows form. With me, form follows function. So technically, the design of the watch, the reason for the thickness, the reason for the large shoulders is all technically orientated. And the philosophy behind it is strength and longevity. The shoulders are strong because there's a very thick bar which runs across the two to hold the strap in place. It'll never wear out, it'll never break. The only thing which is really taken from another piece is the winding crown. And the winding crown, and this was one of the very first pieces I designed. The winding crown is called a Louis XV, which comes from early French pocket watches. It's also been used by IWC and many other houses. Somehow, with my style, it complements, it works. In relation to the philosophy, the sapphires are very thick. The dials here are made from hard enamel. The hands are blued steel. The case construction made for life and further. Okay, if I go back on stage. This was the very first watch that was ever commissioned. First time I went to Japan, a long time ago now, I had a gentleman called Mr. Shimoda who came up to me and said, "Can I make a watch with a single hand in the spirit of early breguets?" This was kind of ironic because I had just designed one, and he didn't know about that, but he asked me could I do it. So I designed it, and as a kind of a homage to Mr. Shimoda, because he was one of my first clients and my first commissions, I asked him could I use his name as the model. So the model became the Shimoda. Okay, this actually connects to what you'll see later. A lot of pieces that I've made are art-based. The cases are primitive in design. They're very, very simple. Basically a drum held in place by four shoulders, which are sculpted. it creates a frame, and whatever you put inside this frame tends to look quite attractive. This watch, which is unusual, not to everybody's taste, it was commissioned by a Taiwanese collector. He was born in my year in 1968, and he wanted to have, if I remember this correctly, he's a monkey, as I'm a monkey, and he wanted to have a golden monkey in the center of the dial, and the 2, 4, 8, and 10 numbers in kanji, Chinese text. The case was satin brushed, and I think there was engraving on the back. It was made specifically for him. The monkey is actually made from a Japanese technique called makie, which itself would have taken quite a... It's a very labor-intensive, long process. It's a combination of lacquer and engraving. And when the piece was finished, and the picture really is far from doing it justice, it looked fab. This is called the Serpent Calendar. It was a piece which I think I released in about... It was one of the first pieces I released in 2004. It became known as the Serpent Calendar because the serpent hand indexing the date around the dial was in the form of a serpent. Another version of it with a diamond set disc in the center. This case is 42 millimeter. I have played as I've made watches, exploring classical, traditional techniques, but I'd always done them for other people, but I never did them for myself. So I made a series of watches using different forms of guilloche. And this is Clou de Paris, which sits in the center. Another technique of guilloche. And then as I was developing my pieces, some of them became more and more complex. This was one of the very first quantum perpetuals that I made back in 2005. Another version of the same watch. This is a 42 millimeter perpetual. We actually have one upstairs. It's from the original collection, but it has technology built into it, which is used in some of my most modern pieces. The picture looks funky, but not very clear. The actual dial is made from hardened and tempered steel. It's actually cut out by laser. Everything is then hand finished. There is then a black PVD treatment, and then all the superluminova in the stars, the hands, everywhere is then applied by hand. This was a project to make a tourbillon wristwatch with a 110-hour power reserve, which I made for Harry Winston, again back in 2005. This was my version of that caliber that I designed for them. On the back of the watch, you have two retrograde indicators, which give 0 to 55 and 55 to 110 in relation to the timing, and it was meant to be linked with English motor racing, where you had 2 fuel tanks. And on the front of the watch, just above 6 o'clock, you have a small black dot. When the watch is wound, it's black, and when you get to the last 24 hours, it changes color to red, as a visual warning from the front of the watch that you need to wind the piece up. That is a dial which I first saw made by a company called Grow and Rip in Germany, who are excellent at being able to machine, polish, and lap mother of pearl and different stones. I saw that they had it, and I thought that would be kind of funky. It's linked with what my style is, with my concept to using materials which basically do not tarnish and do not wear out. We made this piece, and then I made about 20 odd other designs using their technology. This is a simple piece, but made for a client in Singapore using imperial green jade in the center. The outside disc is made from 18-karat gold, and each of the hours is set with a small diamond. This was the very first, what I call like real art piece that I made. It was made with an amazing engraver called Kees Engelbart, and whom we still work with today. It's the only example I actually have in this slideshow. But quite often the art pieces that I make, there's some form of philosophy behind it. With this one, I wanted to have the feeling of a certain energy of how, even though it's static, the 2 dragons, which are made in 18-karat gold, hand engraved, are anti-clockwise going against time, They're sitting on a mokome game base, which is made in a circular fashion to give the impression of fighting time. It's a philosophical concept that everybody actually faces. The piece was not sold in Asia, as most people think. A lot of these watches were sold in America. Once you have something which is inherently beautiful, it doesn't necessarily have to be associated with the culture that the piece was actually born in. And when I work with these kind of artists or artisans, quite often I'll ask them to engrave their name. And by the crown there, you have Kees Engelbart. Okay, this is again from the original collection. Again, reminiscent of early English pocket watches, where you have ornate engraving, and also linking to the foundation watch. This is, a lot of my style is quite Gothic. The topping tool wheel was fairly Gothic, so I kind of thought it would be kind of funky to do something in that spirit. This has 580 diamonds, which are actually set into the base plate of the dial, and all the heads are finished by hand, all hand engraved. There's actually a blued steel ring on the inside of the bezel, which then accentuates the depth of the skulls to really give a feeling of three-dimensionality. Again, a serpent calendar mixed with the art collection pieces, where the center of the case has been engraved in relief to be able to produce the serpents. Unique piece. The work would have taken between 40 and 60 hours just to execute that engraving. Another piece, makie, made with Musu Yamazaki in Kaga in western Japan. Again, same. This was one of the very first pieces. I just spent about 3 years developing my own simple automatic calendar, which had about 6 different derivatives, from center seconds, offset seconds, automatic, manual, which was the intention of using as a base for everything that I would do in the future. I will use it in the future, but also with other pieces. This particular one was made for a Russian client. The dial, following elements from the original pocket watch, far more complex, but it's actually, there's a certain evolution in these pieces. The movement, again, German silver, as with the foundation watch, same kind of circling. Form of the rotor is the same as the cage bridge, so the whole DNA continues to evolve. Now, this is the Marin one. This was the very first watch that I made using the SM2 caliber in series. And even though I wouldn't say this is the most successful watch I've ever made, this is the timepiece which I wear and is probably more me, in essence, than anything else that I've ever done. There's something about it which it's very much, as I talk about a representation of a watchmaker through his work, that watch is who I am. That was the Mark I. That's the caliber. That's the automatic. Every component, every jewel, balance, spring, wheel, pinion, setting mechanism, main plate, everything which is in that watch was made for that watch. It is a complete purebred, and it's one of the most, it is stylistically, it's unique. There is a unique system for regulation on it. The whole design of the watch exists in no other company and has never been made before. The Mark II, Marin I, the same as the first one, except I cut out the center of the enamel dial to be able to start to show a little bit of the caliber. And that technique, by using hardened steel and then laser treating and then filling with superluminova, was developed in that piece. This is the thalassa. It's the profile of the same watch, but in manual version. And there's an evolution here again. Same technology for making the dial. There's a sapphire set into the center. And through the sapphire, you can see the rear of the watch showing all the bridges more highlighted. Through the front of the dial, you begin to see a lot more of this mechanism. You see the bridges which are made in the same Gothic form as the other bridges. And these things are normally covered, they're not conventionally seen. So for the most part, companies don't take much effort in actually designing and making them because they're purely functional. When I designed this, I wanted to design everything so that each individual component was a thing of beauty. The same piece as the Thalassa, but in brown, PVD. This was a unique piece called Vegas Skies, which was sold recently to a client in China. This was a prototype for a watch called for the Marin 3. It's a unique jump power system with a warning. The warning is in the block just to the left of the 5 o'clock. And that is a virtual image of the Marin 3 in its final guise, which will be a piece which will come out sometime next year in the second semester. And that is the Spirit. The Spirit is the piece which I actually launched here tonight. It's a limited edition of 68 pieces. It is based on a watch, the Longines watch that I bought and I restored when I was in Somlo Antiques in London, a long time ago now. And I always wanted to make my own military-esque style piece. Now, it's not a military watch. It's too flamboyant, it's too design-orientated to be that. But the basic concept of black background and luminescent front is found here. All of the numbers are made in three-dimensional superluminova. And when you see the watch, the whole thing really pops out. That's the design side. On the back of the watch, there is a little slogan, Fight, Love, and Persevere. And that is a little bit a personal message from me, or for me, which is a bit representative of what I have experienced and what I know a lot of other people have experienced over the last few years. I have had companies going bankrupt around me, people losing their companies, going through pretty bad, pretty poor experiences. And one thing that runs through everybody, doesn't matter whatever happens to them, there is a spirit in these individuals which continues. So people continue to fight, to love, and to carry on, to persevere. Hence the spirit. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, if there's no more questions, I will love you all and leave you.